people have been telling me to watch Goblin Slayer for quite a while, in part because it was a big meme for a while, and I guess it still is, but also just people saying it's a really good quality anime, and it's not very long. I think there's only 8 episodes at the moment. And the other day I was looking at the website where I can find dubbed anime, and I saw Goblin Slayer was there, so I'm like, I'll watch Goblin Slayer. This, we'll see how it is. And I started watching it, and I love it. It's awesome. The thing I really wonder about is how much of it is a parody and how much of it is like played straight. Because most of the characters in it seem to be like parodies or references to other things like Berserk, maybe Dark Souls. I don't know. There's like a list somewhere where someone goes through and talks about what things are a reference to. And none of the characters that I can recall have names. They all are named by their class or their occupation, like cowgirl, priestess, goblin slayer, high elf, archer, guild girl, etc. None of them are actually named, have real names. And there's like the Adventurers Guild, which is just very formulaic. Like it's basically more of an RP, more of a rigid RPG than like Sword Art Online was, and that was an actual video game. Because in Sword Art Online, it was a bit less formulaic, but this comes across as just IRL D&D, which is pretty funny. And it's funny just the way people talk about like, oh, I'm this rank of adventure, I get to rank up. It kind of reminds me of like in the Mega Man games, how you have the Net Battler license that you level up. And it is funny, and it's well written, and the animation's good, and the action scenes are really good. So just to start off with, it is a very high quality show. And obviously the thing that the centerpiece of Goblin Slayer is Goblin Slayer. Now Goblin Slayer is an alpha autist, and he is extremely autistic. All he cares about is killing goblins. He doesn't care about anything else. He has like 4 or 5 of literally the hottest women on Earth, including Sword Maiden, who's generally considered to be the most beautiful woman on Earth, who have a thing for him, and he's like too autistic and alpha to care. He just doesn't like get it. He's just like, I'm just gonna go kill goblins. I don't give a shit. I have this like high elf archer who's 1,000 years old, and that like every male character is a thing for. I have this super cute guild girl. Priestess is too young, obviously, but she will be a great beauty when she's older. And then he has Cowgirl, who's like super busty, and he has all these like super hot women chasing after him, and he just doesn't give a shit because he's too alpha to care. So like Goblin Slayer's backstory is his entire village, with the exception of Cowgirl, were killed, raped, and murdered by goblins, and because of that, he swore a lifetime of revenge against all of goblin kind. That was going to be the goal for the rest of his life. He was going to get revenge against goblins. He was going to make sure that nothing that happened to him happened to anybody else. And so he spent like the last 10 years training to become a super goblin slayer. Like his armor is ragged and kind of beat up and smells really bad because it's so he can't be detected by smell by goblins. He uses a short sword so it can be used properly within caves. He has all these like gadgets and stuff. In particular, he likes to use gasoline and like explosives and traps and all this other stuff. It's kind of cool to see. I guess you'd say he's an int fighter as opposed to a strength or dex fighter. He uses his intelligence and knowledge to win. Not that he isn't a great fighter with near superhuman strength and dexterity, but it is interesting and kind of different from a lot of things where the main character just kind of powers through. To see that, it kind of reminds me a bit of the main character from Excel World, as he's also kind of an int fighter. Not to the same degree as Goblin Slayer. So yeah, so Goblin Slayer is just obsessed with killing goblins. And it's funny because I would actually say this show is really based. And that's because a lot of things that deal with monsters, particularly like sentient monsters, the motto is, we're the real monsters. we kill goblins because we're like goblins, or we kill demons because we're like demons, or we kill ogres because we're like them. And at the end of the day, we're just as bad as they are. If you This is like a common theme in anime. If you kill him even though he's a genocidal maniac, you're just as bad as he is, because all killing other people is bad in the same way. Killing like that rapist serial killer is the same as killing a child. Especially if you're killing the serial killer because he's about to kill somebody, it's the same thing. And this is funny because whenever people say like, "Oh, Christianity's cucked," they obviously haven't had much exposure to Buddhism, because it's what say whatever you will about Christians, it's part of Christian doctrine, at least most branches of Christianity, that the commandment isn't "thou shalt not kill," it's "thou shalt not murder." Murder and killing are two very different things. Killing in self-defense, extrajudicial killing, it depends on the circumstance for extrajudicial killing. Killing in war, that kind of thing is not considered to be murder. Killing somebody who, yeah, killing like a rapist or something, generally speaking, you're supposed to try to bring that before a judge for the sake of just societal functionality, but it's not the same thing at all as murder. So my point is, in Buddhism, it's like all living things are equally valuable. You can't kill them, and it always irritates me because the refusal to like destroy evil in a lot of anime and stuff leads to a much worse outcome, because it prevents, they're like, oh, we're gonna let him go, he's gonna learn his lesson, and then like the guy immediately goes back to just killing people. And to my mind, the blood is kind of on their hands because they could have stopped him when they had the chance, but they chose to take like a morally irresponsible route out by letting the person go. And I'm sure if you think about it for a bit, there's a lot of anime and a lot of Western stuff that's also like that. Some people are just not redeemable, and even if they are redeemable, what is owed to God and what is owed to society are two kind of different things. So I mean, as a Christian, you'd hope the person would redeem themselves, but on the other hand, they're an objective danger to society, and these are two separate things. So, like, the state has the right to put criminals to death, even if it's an unjust state like North Korea. Like, if someone in North Korea murders someone else or rapes someone else, as illegitimate as the government is, they still have a right to punish that person. But I'm getting off track. My point is, within the show Goblin Slayer, the goblins are just shown as being pure evil, as just being rapists, cannibals, who exist for no other reason than to just destroy civilization and to destroy the world. And this is played completely straight. And Goblin Slayer's obsession with killing them is portrayed as being 100% justified. And this was kind of something interesting that came out of, I don't know if you want to call it Gamergate or just kind of gamer culture in general, but a lot of right-wing people tend to like video games. And I think in our current society, at least, the belief that violence can be a solution to problems tends to be a more right-wing idea, as it's kind of an acceptance, it's kind of a realistic acceptance of how the world is, and kind of a less idealistic way of looking at it. Whereas, like, the modern left, if they were in this world, would say, oh, we just need social programs for the goblins. We need to pay reparations to them because of what Goblin Slayer's done. If Goblin Slayer hadn't have massacred them, then they'd be peaceful. Their lands were being despoiled by, I don't know, the lizard people, etc. It's kind of the approach that they would, I think, take. Whereas Goblin Slayer, I think, takes kind of the more realistic, accepting the world, the real world as it is. They're just evil and they have to be exterminated. It's us or them. And he just doesn't really care for the other people around him. They're like Priest is like, oh, you don't have to kill the children. He's like, no, they're going to grow up. This is total war. We have to kill the children. Goblins are just evil by definition. He's like, maybe there's good goblins, but they should just stay out of my way. Etc. So yeah, he has this single-minded pursuit of them, and it's like severe autism. And for whatever reason, the women are really attracted to that. Apparently, Goblin Slayer is really good looking underneath his armor. He just never takes his armor off because he might be ambushed by a goblin. It's kind of funny at one point because when his party approaches him, he's like, "Are you guys goblins?" They're like, "No, of course we're not goblins." He's like, "Okay, I don't have to kill you then." But he's like not inherently a bad person. Goblin Slayer has shown like he's able to be nice. He's able to be helpful. He doesn't. He, Despite a lot of it being motivated by vengeance, there is a legitimate desire with him to help people out. Like by killing goblins, he's saving villages. He's saving kind of the common people, and that's a big aspect of his motivation. And he's not like unpleasant when he's dealing with people. He's just brutally autistic and very socially awkward. And kind of over time, you start to see him come out of his shell just a little bit. And I do find him a really fascinating character. And I think the other characters are pretty well developed. Obviously, it relies a lot on kind of fantasy tropes, etc. But it's interesting because this is kind of something you see a lot with. To me, like the best aspect of postmodernism as a I don't know if you want to call it a literary or a genre movement, is deconstruction. Is kind of taking stories apart, looking at the guts of them, kind of comparing like the core themes to other stuff, like looking at tropes and memes and that kind of thing. And I think kind of like the final red pill is that these things aren't bad. Um, uh, Deliberately using tropes or memes or things that can kind of be cliche aren't necessarily bad things so well as they reinforce good messages or good moral messages. And eventually what happens, and this is kind of what happened with 4chan and Pull, is you get so far into the whole deconstruction nihilistic postmodernist thing, you kind of come full circle. And that's kind of what Neo-Sincerity was, where to try to kind of shock people, people started adopting like traditionalist Christian or like just various right-wing ideologies, things that were just trying to be as offensive as possible to the current order. And in kind of adopting these as a method of trolling, a lot of people kind of took them into themselves and started to legitimately believe in them. And that's kind of what Neo-Sincerity is. I think to a certain extent, Goblin Slayer is kind of an example of Neo-Sincerity. It's kind of a deconstruction that's also played completely straight, which is interesting. So I like the show. I'd recommend watching it. It's only 8 episodes. It's not particularly long. I'm sure there's going to be another season at some point, but Goblin Slayer, excellent show. Hope you enjoyed the review. More to come.